Welcome to Psych Sessions on Teaching and Learning Centers. My name is Chris Hackala, and I'm your podcast host. In this series of conversations, we speak with folks who have made the leap from a traditional faculty member position to a role in a center for teaching and learning. The conversations focus on how individuals moved from faculty to a center and how that move impacted their work, their career trajectory, and their personal and professional identity. Along the way, we talk about tips, advice, and challenges that come from working in a center. Sit back and enjoy these chats on Psych Sessions on Teaching and Learning Centers.
I am thrilled to be here today to talk with my dear friend, Elizabeth Hammer, about this topic of teaching centers. And Elizabeth is an interesting person to be talking to because she was the first person I knew who went from being a faculty member to a center director. And I think her story is really interesting and compelling, and I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with her. So, Elizabeth, welcome, and thanks for coming today.
Well, thank you so much for asking me to do this, and I'm glad we finally scheduled it.
Yeah, I think it's great. And I my only regret is that I'm not in New Orleans or you're not here, because I believe it would be so much fun to hang out together in person. And I'm hoping we're able to do that again sometime soon. But I really appreciate you taking the time, knowing that you've gone through some things down there recently in New Orleans. And I just, as you said, we've had trouble scheduling as we've had things come up. So I'm really happy to be talking to you.
Thank you.
I'd like to start with the question I've been talking to most people about, and that is if you could just give me a little bit of a background in terms of your journey to a teaching center director from a faculty position. Because, as I said, you're the first person I knew who did this, and it was one of those moments where I thought that might be a path I might want to follow someday. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and your story.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? That's a possibility. Who knew?
I know.
When I think about this question, I really trace it back to becoming a faculty member, actually, because my first tenure track job was at Belmont University in Nashville. And their teaching center at that time was, I think it was 2 years old. I could be a little bit off, but it was new. It was new. And it had the inaugural director, Dr. Awalt from philosophy department. And so so it was a new center. It had a lot going on. We had a really long and rich new faculty orientation program that went throughout the semester, where we were a cohort. It had all kinds of opportunities to, attend workshops to improve your teaching, but also mini grants to do different things in your class. And they had one program called a teaching timeout where you could, because Belmont, like many small schools, was a 4-and-4 teaching load. So you could get a course reduction to do something interesting pedagogically in another course. And I loved it. I loved it. So I got there, and that immediately became my community. It became my people. I was one of those, now what faculty developers would call like a frequent flyer or green light faculty. I was always applying for things and doing things and going to things. And so I just really quickly became part of the group of people who used the teaching center. Okay, so that was the very beginning. And then I just loved teaching. And if backing up even one more minute, when I got my PhD, my motivation was if getting my PhD could get me to be able to teach, I'm doing this, because I taught my first class, when I was a grad student. I was like, I loved it. So that just really helped me find my people. And so then, so because of that, I was kind of doing unique things, thinking a lot about my own teaching. That naturally then led me to the scholarship of teaching and learning, right? Reading journals. At that point, I was using it more as a scholarly teacher. Like, what can I do? What's cool things that are happening now with service learning or other different, team teaching or whatever it was I was thinking about. So I was going to the literature a lot. And so I just was, from the beginning of my career, knew that this existed, right? And then I changed jobs. I was able to come home to New Orleans, and I got a position at Loyola University here in the city in New Orleans. And Loyola did not have a teaching center. And I was stunned. I mean, this is a Jesuit liberal arts school, and you don't have a teaching center. Wow. And so I looked for ways there to fill the hole, like fill the hole in that. How can I do this, and what can I do? And it was interesting. At that point, I got on a committee at Loyola that looked at forming a teaching center and doing this. It never got off the ground for a million political reasons that aren't of interest to the story. But my dean at the time, his name was Frank Scully, he said, well, why don't I give you a course release and you become a faculty development intern, is what he called it, in the dean's office, and do what you want, do whatever you want. So I put together some Saturday brown bags, some Saturday workshops. I did a couple of brown bags, got people together. This was like at the beginning of using an LMS, right? The beginning of Blackboard. So kind of got people together to do different things. I just kind of did a few little things along the way. And then and then Xavier, University of Louisiana, the place where I was meant to be, had a full-time position. After Katrina, 2007, they've had the Teaching Center for the Advancement of Teaching and Faculty Development, affectionately known as CAT. So if I say CAT, that's my center. CAT was founded in 1994 through a grant from the Kellogg Foundation. It's had some really nice grant funding along the way, and in 2007, they hired a full-time director, and I felt like at that point my CV was such that I applied. Felt like this is the job for me, right? The one other thing I will add that is when I was at Loyola, and had tenure, had promotion, and I felt like, okay, at that point I could also pick and choose my service that I wanted to do. By that time, I knew I was interested in faculty development. Right, I was already on this committee. Let's get a teaching center, and I was kind of envisioning myself playing a role in that. So I just started picking committees and service that had a faculty development component. So if it didn't relate, like if I didn't see that, in it, a role in it, then I would kind of say no to some service things, if I could. And then the last little bit I want to say about my journey is also was associate. I think she was associate dean at the time at Loyola, Lori Joyner. She put together a really nice faculty development program. Didn't call it that, right? Because we didn't have that, but just put together a really nice summer program that was about improving pedagogy, and that gave me a little boost too to see like long-term initiatives. And I'm like, yeah, I want to do this. So then I just kind of did committee work, kind of did my own scholarship, kind of just build the CV to make it where when I saw that position, I felt like I hit the criteria.
And so you were hired in 2007? So you've been there
at Xavier
now 14 years at Xavier.
Yes.
Yeah. And your center,
love it.
And you, I imagine you do. I've been to your center. It's a beautiful place with a lot of really good work being done. But what's interesting to me is that you went from essentially running being on a committee to look at a center, doing some small faculty development, to being in charge of a pretty large center. And so to me, that's a big leap, and one that I think if we think what you said before, if we take that and think about it a little bit, it was very intentional. Your whole career path was leading towards this. And you said something at the beginning that I just want to come back to. I think it was great. Was the idea that you thought getting my PhD will allow me to teach. That's what I want to do. And I like that because I remember the same thing. I remember thinking, I started in social psychology. I ended up in cognitive psychology, and I really liked my research in cognitive psychology, but more I liked teaching. And I went to an institution that focused on teaching because of that. And it sounds like we had that same pathway. And so you end up at a place where you get to have that impact on faculty across the institution. I'm just curious, and I asked this question to a lot of people. I'm really curious about it. What did this do to your professional identity, given you went from faculty to really an administrator? At least in practice, did that affect your professional identity both within the institution or within the academy, as well as sort of broadly across your disciplines?
Yeah, that is such an interesting question, isn't it? I've got like three things running through my head. Where do I start? So the identity part, you and I are lucky. I know you're speaking to people outside of psychology, but you and I are lucky, right? Psychology is, I'm going to say, like the breeding ground for faculty development. Like we it's based on cognitive science. Learning is based on cognitive science, and so much of the early pedagogy, and it came from other disciplines too, but psychology has definitely been a forefront leader as well. So because of that, and because of the Society for the Teaching of Psychology and, colleagues there, I felt like I never, and because of the great advice of Jane Hallinan, who says, keep one foot in your discipline at all times, I don't feel like I lost my identity. If anything, it became more solidified because I wasn't trying to say, I'm going to make my career mark in moving forward theories of social psychology. Right. Instead, I'm going to do it in the teaching world, and psychology has that place. So I felt like I didn't lose my professional identity at all. And if anything else, it became stronger because I bring now my CAT experience, my center experience to what I do with STP and that sort of thing. Now, as far as like on-campus identity, that was something that I really was concerned about and really thought intentionally about, because not only was I shifting positions, it would have been different if I was shifting positions at my own institution where I'd been for a while, but I actually was going to a new institution, right? Where they didn't know me, and I didn't have my reputation there. I didn't have anything to build on. Now, quick disclaimer. For anybody listening to this, my husband works at Xavier University of Louisiana and has been here since 2000 and loves it. And so I had a little bit of a springboard because he was known and his reputation is known, and he's a fabulous teacher and has won our teaching awards. And so I had a little bit of help and privilege there. But when I came here and I was negotiating coming, it was and is a staff position, a 12-month position. In the job description, teaching was not included. And I really pushed back on that in my negotiations and just said, I felt like, first of all, Xavier, for listeners who don't know, Xavier is the only historically Black Catholic school in the United States. And although I had been at a Catholic school, I had not been at a historically Black school. But that neither here nor there. I feel like I can't go in and really support faculty if this is my philosophy, if I am not in the classroom seeing what they're dealing with and, knowing our students. How can you really be the best? And again, this is my philosophy, but how can you be the best faculty developer if you don't know the norms and the students?
Yeah. And I'm just going to right here, just interrupt for 1 second, say this. And I couldn't agree with you more. And part of the reason for that is you and I are contemporaries. And I can tell you, and I suspect you feel the same way, students in classroom behavior has changed. Yeah. And if you're not in the classroom, you may not be aware of some of the large scale changes that have happened in the way teaching and learning works. And so I agree with you. I think you have to be in the classroom so you know that. But I also know there are people who feel like they can get that in other ways. Personally, for me, I feel like I want to be in the classroom, and I know you feel the same way. So,
yeah, that's exactly it. It's about how students change, how what's the zeitgeist of this generation or whatever. I sometimes can overblow those things, but it's also like, what is it? What does it feel like to use our technology in the classroom? What does it feel like to use our facilities? What are our faculty needs? And then for me, it was also just establishing my own credibility and my own, credibility of I'm not this outsider coming in and telling you what to do. I'm here with you. So I have taught every single semester that since I've been here, sometimes more than once. I wouldn't recommend that, but there's been a need. I've taken on a little bit more, but I've taught every semester, and I can't imagine. First of all, it's still my favorite part of the week. Let's be honest. It's still, I tell my students that. I try to explain to them what the center is and what I do full time and why my office isn't in the psych department and why I'm, a little different. But then I say, but my favorite time is when I close this door and we play. That's what I tell them. So that kind of helped with identity issues. The other thing is, but I couldn't get faculty status. Let me back up and say this. It was kind of strange. They actually hired me as a full professor, Xavier. The administration at the time, I was hired as a full professor. I was eligible for it at Loyola. So they said, submit your materials and we'll put it through our committee. And so it went through review and I got hired as full professor, but they would not hire me with tenure. They just said that because Xavier has a unique mission, which I agree with, has a unique student population, that they are not going to hire anybody without seeing their teaching evaluations. And that's all they need to say. And I said, fine. We'll come back to this. So then a few years later, I talked to my provost and said, okay, I'm ready. Here's my stuff. Let's apply. Let me apply for tenure. And he did. And, rest is history. So there are other little things that I did that I made really certain to do, is that I don't dress like an administrator. I don't have a title that's an administrator. We are not in the provost's office. We're not in the dean's office. I know that there are models like that work really well. So I'm not disparaging anybody's models. There's models like that work really well for again, my faculty culture that I have. It's really nice just to be separate from all of that. Yeah. So then quickly, and now my identity is set here, and I'm seen. Some colleagues might disagree with this, but most, I think, would agree that I'm seen as a colleague and seen as a support system. And everybody knows I teach. We talk about my classes a lot.
Yeah, I think that what you just said is so interesting. It resonates so well with some of my personal experiences, in that I do the same thing as you. I teach. I am seen as a colleague with my colleagues. I sit on committees, faculty committees. I advise some students, and I think that it has been really helpful for me to identify that I'm not just here to tell faculty how to teach, but they see. And my evaluations are there. If you want to look at my evaluations, I also open my classroom to faculty. I say, anytime you want to drop in, you don't even have to tell me, just come on by, and you're welcome into my class. And I think that has set a good tone on campus for people to know that it's not just about me feeling like I can sit here and tell you what to do. I'm actually in it and doing it. And I think that that's really valuable. And I think that the colleges, as they look at these centers, they need to consider a lot of different sort of local culture perspective with regard to how they want to position the center and what they want the people to do. And so I like what you said. It's not disparaging other models. It's more about looking at where the center is going to be positioned within an institution and what the goals of that center are. My goals, I think, are similar to yours. Is that's to be a support system for faculty to help them with all sorts of things in the classroom, including some digital things, but also with theoretical approaches to teaching, with observations, with advice on how to leverage their skill set in a way that's going to really benefit the students. All of that's really important. And so I need to be perceived as a colleague at my institution to be able to do that. And I think other places... Go ahead.
And we're at relatively small places where that is different. I can see places where being housed in the provost's office would be more useful, because either it's so large that it's kind of a central place, or the faculty vibe is I'm only going to do this if I get, or if I need to do this, or I just got to have a different stamp on it, Yeah.
Well, let me ask you, because I think this is something that's been gnawing around, and I hadn't intended on asking this, but I'm curious. To me, the distinction between a teaching center and a faculty development center is actually an interesting one. And some people draw the line differently than others. But what are your thoughts on that? Because I do think there is a difference in terms of what people are trying to do sometimes.
There is. And so, I agree. I said there is, like, I know the proof. I'm just agreeing in my opinion. But yeah, so in 2014, it was CAT's 20th anniversary. We were at the Center for the Advancement of Teaching. It was CAT's 20th anniversary. And we put together a broad faculty representation committee. We called them our MVPs, mission, values, and programs. And we just did a really kind of in-depth, it was a whole year process. Our MVPs were great. And a whole year process looking at CAT's mission from 1994. Is it still serving everybody now? It's in the same way? Should it be changed? Should it do this? And we expanded our mission. And so we are now the Center for the Advancement of Teaching and Faculty Development. CAT plus FD, which quickly became CAT plus, which quickly just became right back to CAT. But we're still officially, we have faculty development. And we expanded our mission. And our mission is to support the mission of our university by supporting faculty in all stages of their career and all areas of responsibility. So we support scholarship teaching, service, believe it or not, and work-life balance. So we do work-life balance. So we make sure part of our annual planning and then the kind of assessment that we do on our own programming, we make sure we've hit all of those categories. We're still pedagogically heavy. That's definitely our main emphasis, our main programming and support. But we do have programming and every other thing. We have a faculty writing group that meets and does, and it's for scholarship. And we have done some writing productivity things, and then for service, we've done some things on especially for newer faculty. Well, and actually across the careers, I think about this. We've done some things for mid-career faculty too, but like I was just saying, choosing your service to help your CV become a certain way, to give yourself the professional experiences you want, to use your strengths, those kind of things. And then we do some work-life balance. We do a weekly meditation. We have an expert here in the center, Bart Everson, who's an expert on contemplative practices. So we've done time management. We've done, various other kind of things. So I do think that I do worry, and this is one thing. And if you can believe, I'm considering myself a mid-career faculty developer, not just a later mid-career faculty member. I do worry about stretching ourselves too thin, about mission creep, right? So we come back to our mission a lot when we're asked to do things that could be, kind of there, but maybe not there in the mission. I do. It's a lot. And I do really want to keep my eyes on it and want to, before I turn it over at some point, want to be sure that we've got a solid footing and what that really means to us.
Yeah, you bring up some really interesting points, and it's one that something that I know a lot of centers struggle with. I know I struggle with it as the only full-time member of the center. I have instructional designers that work with me, but they have a whole separate job. I worry about the mission creep as well, and I think that's part of the distinction between the two. So I think that's a really, really important point. So I appreciate your thoughts on that. What advice would you give someone who wants to go this route into? I mean, you've given some already. Be intentional about your service, but how might someone position, say, maybe their resume, their CV, if they want to apply for a job and they have not worked formally in a center, but they want to work in a center? What sorts of things do you think would be helpful?
Well, the first thing I would say is to really do some soul searching about that. This is what you want to do. And the kind of questions I would say, ask yourself is this what you want to do? Is your own classroom the most exciting thing about your job? Do you change your assignments almost every semester? Do you hear something new and go, oh, I got to try that out? These are the kind of characteristics of people who thrive. I would say thrive and flourish in these kind of jobs. If it's there's not enough time to do all the stuff I want to do and try in the classroom, then that's a really good sign. And then I would say, start locally and then reach out. Find your people on campus. So if you have a center, so my advice would be different if you have a center or not. If you have a center, find those people, that green light group that's going to all your equivalent of CATS activities that are there. Find them, go to these things, see how it's being done. Talk to your center directors and staff people and say, hey, I would like to help out, or I would like to do this, or I would like to do a workshop, or and just kind of start to get enmeshed in the center programming and the center activities, because that way then on your CV, you can list, here's my center and here's all the things I've done. And then you can definitely get your center director to write a letter for you and be a reference or that kind of thing. If you don't have a center, it's a little harder, but it's kind of the same thing. Find the people who are excited about doing stuff and say, hey, do you want to do a book club? There's it's another thing, look at all the new books that are coming out all the time that are amazing, and just say, so start just there. That's cheap, right? You can do this by buying a $14 book on Amazon and then going out to lunch with some people and say, let's just do this. And then what you can put in a letter of application is, I organize this informal, impromptu book club, and then from that, fine. Hey, let's each do something in our classes next semester from this book, and maybe let's gather some data on it, and maybe then let's try to publish that or present that. And now you're presenting at teaching conferences, and that would be the other thing: is go to teaching conferences, meet the people there, start to present with people besides just in your institution. So maybe if you go to a really cool Chris Hackala presentation and you're like, hey, I'm interested in this too. You want to gather data in my institution and your institution? And then you can, kind of go from there. There's just to find again, you have to do this within your personality. You can tell Chris and I are both very extroverts, so it's maybe sounds a little easier to us. You got to do it within your personality, but it's find a way to enmesh yourself in the community at your institution, whatever that's going to look like, in your discipline, whatever the discipline is, and then you can then see what's happening on the national level.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I think that one of the ways that you've described that I think is incredibly useful is, even if you're not an extrovert, is to look for people who share your passion, because even if you're an introvert, your ability to be slightly extroverted comes out when you're talking about something you're passionate about. And so look for those people. And I think that if there is a teaching center, it's a great way to learn how centers run and to get a feel for what people are doing and to see the different roles that someone plays in a teaching center, from doing workshops on, as you said, work-life balance, to helping people design assignments that support student learning in ways that maybe you hadn't thought of before. I also really liked your comment about looking at your own teaching and thinking about how exciting it is to you. And I think that's one of the things that, and I really, as I talk about this, it really warms my heart. It's one of the things that really did it for me early on, is that, like what you said, is teaching has always been the highlight of my day. And some of us, like you and I, who have full-time jobs and still engage in teaching, have learned that we love our job. I love my job. I know you love your job, but being in the classroom, there's something different, and there's something magical about that place and that space. And when things happen in that space, sometimes that you can't easily quantify, describe, but you experience it. And I think that's really valuable. So,
yeah. And if I may say something to anybody who's listening, who's a new faculty developer who might be listening to this, or somebody who's in faculty development and was just interested in listening to this, I think, you also have an evolution of your career once you get into faculty development, right? I'm a totally different faculty developer than I was when I first started. The where I'm putting my energies in CAD are totally different than when I first started. Yep. And then my confidence in the classroom, the kind of teacher I am, is totally different than not totally different. My essence is still there. I always cared. But now it's like, man, the more chaos, the better. Let's do this. I'm comfortable in a way that I'm just never was before. Oh my gosh, I think back to some early teaching experiences. And I think a lot of that learning comes from observing so many other people's classes, right? I've observed so many people's classes where there's students kind of talking in the background, in the back or in the middle. And you can see it just bugging the faculty member, especially since I'm in the room observing. And I know, because I'm sitting there, they're talking about the material. Like they're talking about, and so now that's totally changed my attributions about students. If they start talking in my class, like, okay, I'm going to let them work this out, or I'm going to say, do you need something? Or, just as opposed to, I'll wait till you're done, or something. It just is totally changed.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really nice observation, because I think that if I spoke to a dozen of us who still teach, that same comment about the confidence you have in the classroom would be there. And it's not a confidence that I feel like I'm just this master teacher, but it's this confidence that I can help these students learn in ways that I couldn't do 20 years ago.
That's exactly right. My confidence about sage on the stage is probably maybe even less the further I get from graduate school. The confidence about, like, I'm the authority. Now I know how much I don't know, but the confidence to facilitate learning facilitate learning.
Yep.
And then one other thing I would want to say about like changes over the career for any faculty developers who are listening is also like one big shift that I've seen is like we are just shifting. And then we haven't gotten rid of one shot wonder workshops, but we've definitely shifted our main energies from like away from here is a workshop on this to longer, more sustained initiatives. Okay, we're going to do a learning community or a working group or whatever we want to call it, that, whatever year it is, that, on this topic that we're going to deal with for a year or a semester, as opposed to come learn about active learning and then you'll do it. So it's kind of neat. We're still growing. So don't feel like you'll reach this pinnacle and stop growing. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. This is great. And Elizabeth, thank you so much for all of this and for your time and for sharing your insights on this. I think it was great. You and I could talk for hours on this, but I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future. But thanks for being here today and for sharing your thoughts.
Thanks so much, Chris. Always a pleasure.